Assalamu'alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome everyone to another episode of Sisters Hour. We'll just wait for a couple more minutes so that people can join us. But in the meantime, I hope everybody is well. If this is your first time coming on Sisters Hour, welcome. It's great to see you. If this is a recurring time and you're a supportive follower, welcome back. I hope everyone is well. Please do let us know where you're tuning in from. We always love to know where our viewers are watching us from. Are you in the UK? Are you somewhere abroad? Are you in sunny Malaysia, or are you in the UK? Inshallah, we will begin, and the topic today is about interracial marriages, culture, love, and Islam, and it's with my good friend, Dr. Tayyibah. Just before we start, Sisters Hour is a safe platform that was created by Sofa Mosque London to provide the women in the community to share their stories, experiences, and their journeys. Alhamdulillah, this will be our 33rd or 34th episode, and we've been privileged to be able to host a number of women and to be able to share their stories. And as always, if you're interested in joining, please do comment below. Please do let us know that you want to get in touch, and we would love to hear your story, and we would love to give you the platform. Inshallah, we can begin now. Let me introduce. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Tayyibah.
Walaikum assalam. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well. Welcome to Sisters Hour. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. Thank you for having me.
No worries. And this is such a huge topic, interracial marriages, and it's such a privilege to have you on, to come and talk about it from your own experience. Because for the viewers, Tayyibah has been married to a British Jamaican brother for 3 years now. They're happily married. I actually went to their wedding, and it was a beautiful wedding. And today's session will be bringing light to the challenges and to the beauty of interracial marriages. And as always, please do comment and ask questions below. But we'll start off with kind of taking a step back and seeing how you were brought up, Tayyibah, if that's okay. Were interracial marriages common when you were growing up? How did your family think of interracial marriage?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say that this will be like a personal account almost of what my experience has been and my journey has been, and I realized that there's lots of people out there who have different experiences, and I just hope that people can relate in some way, and that it is beneficial to everyone out there. In terms of like my community growing up and my family, interracial marriage wasn't all that common. I mean, I think I only knew of 2 interracial marriages. One which themselves had decided they weren't going to be part of the community and live their own separate life, and the other, sadly, they got excommunicated from the community for marrying someone outside. And so it wasn't the done thing, but also it wasn't something that was accepted when I was growing up. But in terms of what my family's stance was, that they had always been very open. So the example of where I talked about the family who got excommunicated, this was a girl who got married to a Black Caribbean Muslim, and their family, nobody from the community was interacting with their family anymore, and that caused a lot of problems, especially for her mum. She found it very difficult to deal with, and became quite depressed. And at that point, my mum stepped in. She would go over, make sure she's okay, and keep her connected to the community in some way, and as much as she could. So from my family's perspective, like, they were always aware and sympathetic towards interracial marriages, but I don't think like they had ever thought about it in terms of like their own selves and their own family. Yeah.
And you talked about having different examples of interracial marriages and the problems and the way that they're treated by the community. But in a way, it's lovely to see that your parents kind of stood up and provided that support, the emotional support for them, and kind of recognized like, okay, they're dealing with hardship. How can I make it easy? And did that affect your upbringing?
Yeah, 100%. I think like my parents always tried to be, I guess, good Muslims, like everyone is trying to be in the community, and people who can help people, others in the community, you know. And that's like, you know, from like your own community, like that's how people gel together. That's how the community stays strong and stays together, essentially. And so like from my parents' perspective, yeah, they found that as something that they had to do. Like it wasn't a question, they just had to do it. There must be Islam, there's nothing wrong with this. And so for them it was like, no, it's okay, that as long as they're happy, we need to be able to support them. It's not like an Islamic law has been broken and we need to, like, you know, make some extra like fuss about it. It's more actually it's something different. We're just not used to it, but that doesn't mean we can't be open to it. Especially because, like, coming from, I'm Pakistani, British Pakistani, so within my community, they always are talking about, especially around religion, they are like, oh, Islam's not racist. Islam's, you know, all inclusive. It's so inclusive. Everyone can be Muslim. But I think sometimes like we forget that when you say that, that also means inclusive within your home, and inclusive within your circle, inclusive within your family, right?
That's really beautiful. And I love what you said about being inclusive, not just in the community, but even closer, even smaller. It's in the home and the circles that you have and the companions that you're with. So it sounds as if your parents were very supportive. They were very I can say open-minded in a way. And I wanted to ask, how did your family's attitude affect your own personal journey into finding a husband? I mean, they had great morals and they had great attitude. You know, I'm sure that was passed down to you when you were looking for someone.
Yeah, 100%. I think like I was definitely looking for someone who had like good character or had like a good personality, someone who I could gel with, spend life, you know, because it's not a small decision that is made. This is the rest of your life you will be spending with this person. Ideally, that's the situation that you are, you know, that's the intention with which you enter a marriage. Now, with regards to like my parents, I always had to have that open conversation. Like, I saw my parents do this for other people, but I didn't know if that would be the case for me. I also didn't know if I ever brought this up, and if I was in this situation, how they would behave. You know, it's one thing to be supportive to someone else; it's another thing to accept this for yourself. And I think like it's a wide example within the Muslim community. We're always the first ones to welcome a new Muslim in. We're always the first ones, you know, oh, you know, this new Muslim, come to the mosque, you know, come and have dinner with us. But we don't say, come and marry our son, come and marry our daughter. Like, that's another step for us, you know, like that's like, oh, okay, hold on 1 minute. I need to think about this. And so I was like, well, I don't know if my parents would be okay with it. Yes, I see them do all these things in the community, but I need to have that conversation. So before I met my husband and before like we were even talking, very early on, I started talking to them about what was acceptable for them and what wasn't. What were they open to and what were they not open to? So I would like just randomly pose questions like, okay, so would like skin color matter to you? Like, what if their entire family wasn't Muslim, like they were just Muslim, or only some of them were Muslim? Would that matter to you? What if, like, you know, they didn't like some of our food? Is that okay? Like, you know, like, sometimes it's like there's such like silly questions. You think, oh, you know, that's what such a dumb question. Why do I need to ask that? But it's not so much about the depth of the question. It's more opening that conversation.
And that's so important to have. Yes.
Yeah, I think like we just, you need to have that initial start and then an opening where they can think about these things, because likelihood is before you mentioned it, they never thought about it.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, and it's the same kid, like, and the reason I'd got to that point even was because I'd been seeing people within the community, within my friendship circle, they wouldn't have these conversations with their parents, and then they'd find someone who wasn't from their culture or their community, and then they would be like having all these problems with their parents, because now they're like, I want to marry this person, and their parents are like, no, what is this, where is this coming from? And it's just out of the blue. And it's so that your parents, like, they need a moment to understand. They need a moment to realize. Like, even for me, when I first suggested my husband, my parents were like, but what about Pakistani boys? Aren't there any good Pakistani boys? And
where are they all?
exactly, right? And I was just like, oh, like in that moment, it clicked to me that I had gone on a journey of finding a spouse, and I hadn't taken them with me. I had met all these Pakistani people, and none of them had gelled. And that was just how it was, because I was meant to marry someone else. So it just didn't work out. But all of those encounters, I didn't share with my parents. I didn't take them on that journey. So then they were like, this is out of the blue. You haven't even considered anyone. You know, you never told us about anybody. Like, we don't know anything. And then I was like, oh. And that's where I had to realize, like, I made a mistake. Yes, I should have taken them on my journey. I should have been telling them about my life and what was happening and who I was meeting and who was behaving in what way and, you know, how I was feeling about things. And I hadn't. So in that moment, I had to take a step back and be like, okay, no, come. I'll take you on my journey. Like, this is what I did. These are the people I met. This is how it went. This is what I felt. This is what they said. And then my parents were like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah, and what I love about what you've just said is bringing along your parents on the journey of trying to find someone. And you said that, you know, you tried to date someone who is of the same culture of you, same background, but it didn't work out. It just, you know, it didn't click. There was no chemistry. How did you come to marry Leon, and how did you, you know, and were there any fears around marrying someone outside of your culture?
Yeah, a lot of fears, because I think out of like my family and my siblings, I would have pegged myself as the one who would marry within the community. And that ended up not happening, you know. And it wasn't like something I'd set out to be like, oh no, I'm like going to rebel against something. Like, I'm very much like, I will follow the laid road. I will follow my parents and do what they say. And my entire life has been like that, you know. Like, I've never like been the rebel or like pushed back, had resistance towards what they had to say. So like, this was one of those times I was like, oh wow, I might actually have to take like a good stance on this, because I don't know what they'll say or how they'll behave. Like, I had some idea because I'd had some conversations with them, but now I was about to present to them an actual human being, not a hypothetical scenario.
Like, but this is him.
Yeah, like, this is a person. Like, do you want to consider him to be your son-in-law? And yeah, that, alhamdulillah, it was a good experience for me. But in terms of like how I found Leon, it's kind of funny, because growing up, I didn't have many good examples of marriages. Like, around me, that everyone seemed like so sad all the time. Like, because my house was such an open door policy that we had so many people from the community come, and like, they'd be sharing their stories with my parents. And oftentimes, if there was like a woman, she'd come and talk to my mum, and I would be the one listening. I would be privy to all those conversations, and none of it seemed positive. Like, it always was like, oh, you know, I have this problem and that problem. And all these people, nobody was married to someone outside of the culture. Nobody was married to, like, you know, someone who didn't speak their language, or they had like racial barriers or cultural barriers. They're from the same culture within the same community. They'd all be together, you know. So they had so many problems. And of course, there was like so many like people who who had great lives, but I didn't hear about that because someone who's having a good life is raving about it. But whoever's having a bad time, they were coming to my parents and being like, look, I have this problem, what should I do? I have this problem, what should I read? I have this problem, what you know.
So you were only aware of kind of...
Well, I was, like almost like hyper aware of the things that can go wrong in a marriage. So I was always just like, this seems like too much trouble. I don't want to do this. I don't want to get married. Like, forget this. I can just do life by myself. It's like peaceful. I don't have to have all these worries and troubles. So for me, it was like, I was very afraid. Having not having that like huge examples or great examples of marriage, I was very scared of, okay, you know, for a long time, I resisted the idea of marriage, and my parents would be like, no, everyone has to get married. It's half your deen, blah, blah, blah. You know, like the usual stuff your parents try to do to convince you to get married when you're young. And I was like, okay, eventually I said, okay, fine, I will consider this, and I will consider getting married at one point in my life. Fine. At that point, I was like very afraid. I was like, I don't know how it's going to turn out. What if it turns out bad like that auntie, or what if it turns out bad like that uncle? And I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And at that point, I was still very young. I was like 18 maybe at the time, you know, and one of my teachers, my Quran teacher actually, she was like in her late 20s looking for someone. She was actively looking for a spouse, and she said, you know, I pray at night when everyone's asleep for my spouse. Because she had also had like similar, like she'd seen similar stuff, so she was like also kind of afraid, and she was like, you know, that's what I do. I just pray to Allah because Allah's got me. And I was like, that's a good idea. Like,
I should make you right.
I'm gonna start doing that. So then I started praying for a spouse, and I started praying for like someone who's good, someone who'd look after me, someone who wouldn't be like rude, someone who wasn't rude to my parents, someone who would like just fit in the family and wouldn't like stick out like a sore thumb in many ways, like as in like would gel with everyone, would get along. And I'm like the eldest sibling as well, and I'm a girl. So in our culture, like sometimes when you're the eldest girl and the person you marry tries to overpower your younger siblings, you know. And I was like, I don't want that. I would just want them to like be them, and them to leave my siblings alone, and my siblings can do themselves, you know. I don't want any like rifts or any like problems and stuff. Yeah, and I just was like, Ya Allah, just please give me someone who's gonna be like nice, who's going to like love you, love Rasulullah, like could be a good husband, a good son, a good brother-in-law, you know. And I think like that's something that everyone would pray for. But when you sit down and start praying, like I didn't pray for someone to be Pakistani, I didn't pray for someone to be brown, I didn't pray for someone who speaks Urdu and eats curry and, you know, comes from my
character.
I prayed for like a good person.
Mashallah.
And so when my Armin, a good friend of ours, like she mentioned Leon and she said, you know, what about him? I was like, okay, maybe, like, I don't know if he would be up for that. And I think even for him, he was like, I don't think I marry Asian people because they're so racist towards Black people. Like, I don't think I'd be accepted in their community. You know, he had ruled like my community out. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know how everyone's going to take this. But after like getting to know him and then presenting him to my parents and being like, look, this is someone, would you like guys consider this person? He seems good to me. Like, he seems like a really nice person. And then them spending time with him, I don't think I could have, like, all my du'as got answered. Essentially, I don't think I could have asked for anything else. But I also recognized that there was things that I didn't ask for. So how do I expect Allah to give me something that I didn't ask for? When you sit down to ask for Allah, you ultimately you do end up whistling it down to your core things that matter to you really. And really, skin color, race, culture didn't matter. When it came down to it, when I was sat in front of Allah, I wasn't asking for those things. I was asking for a good person. I was asking for a good character. I was asking for someone who would be nice, who would look after me, because there's so much that happens in our communities that sometimes we're not even aware, like, you know, domestic abuse, violence, things that happen behind closed doors that we're not privy to. In a marriage, so much can happen, but the outside world doesn't know. And I always prayed, like, whoever my partner is, that behind closed doors they're nice, that they're good to me. They're not like one person, like they could be like, I don't know, sheikh of the community, and then like behind closed doors they're not treating me good, you know, like, and that, what would I do then? And I think, like, I had so many fears around marriage itself. It wasn't really about race and color and things, you know.
You know, one of the things that I absolutely take away from what you've said is praying for good character and having someone who's authentic, you know, who doesn't have 10 different personalities and who doesn't show different sides of himself depending on the person. And that, you know, you said that I wanted someone who get along with my parents, with my siblings, and essentially at the end, those are the core essence and the core morals and the character that you want when you meet someone, when you want to share your life. And I think it's such a strong reminder for us, you know, especially to those who are looking to get married, and even for those parents who, you know, pray for the children, for spouses, you know, pray for good character, pray for their happiness. And I guess, you know, we don't try to imagine what that person will look like, but imagine how they will behave.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, now you've been married for 3 years, you know, you have your culture, he has his culture. How much does your actual culture influence your marriage? And how have your experience been with the Muslim community? You know, you're married. Do they treat you differently?
So taking the first part of your question, within a marriage, it's just a marriage. Like, he's a husband, I'm a wife, we get on with it. You know, like, there isn't much else. Like, I don't think culture and race is what is the cause of any problems within the marriage. It's things like, as long as you've got open communication, you're good at communicating with one another. Like, the problems, if anything, are because he's a man and I'm a woman. We think differently, you know. Like they say, men are from Mars and women are from Venus or whatever. Like, I think those are bigger differences. Like, those are the things, and that would happen regardless of race and culture within a marriage. Those are just some of the challenges you face. We think differently. We're different genders, but that's a whole different ball game, you know. Like, and I don't think like that's got nothing to do with race or culture.
Right?
The wider Muslim context, definitely, I do feel a change after marriage. So much of the time, we don't get recognized as, and not just within the Muslim community, but within the wider context of living in London or living in England. We're not seen as a couple. But even more so within the Muslim context, it's not a norm outside of our circle. So it's not always seen as like, oh, these two people are together, you know. And although we never within the Muslim context, we haven't faced racism. I think what hurts me more actually than if they were just plain racist is that they often don't think I'm married to him. So that, like, for me on a personal level, that affects me more, because I'm like, why don't you think we're together? Like, what's wrong with you?
It is really painful for me to hear it. And my heart's breaking at knowing that your people don't verify or don't believe that you're married just by, the color of your skin. And I want to ask, like, what would you want to see from the Muslim community, from the community that we're in being more accepting? Like, should we be less judgy, but is there any way that we should act when you come?
Yeah, I think being open, like, don't judge or assume, like there's silent assumptions being made of who I am and who Leon is and what our relationship is and how we know each other. Are we friends? Are we, just ask, like, you'd know if you just ask. But the other day we were like, our car broke down and we had to get an Uber, and we were on our way home. And honestly, we got to our home, and the Uber driver said, "And what's the next address?" Because he didn't think we were together. And I was just, and this was a Muslim man, like he didn't know us. Fair enough, you know, but like it was just like the assumption that we weren't together and we lived in different houses, and I was just like, no, we're
Just
married.
tagging along for the ride.
No, just the one address, just the one. I think it's things like that, like that can happen, you know, like where, and if I think within our community it is getting better as well. Like alhamdulillah, we have a good, outside of our family, we do have a good network where a lot of the friends we know are in interracial marriages, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. But at this point, I also have to say that it is thanks to earlier generations who did take that big step to become, you know, to enter an interracial marriage that allows us to have the privileges we have today, where it is a bit more normal. It's not the most common thing, but it is much more accepted today than it was, like, say, you know, 20 years ago. I mean, I'm forever grateful for the fact that I came to London, for the fact that I met the people I met. I met so many people at Rimi's Cave, even and at Suffolk College. You know, like I had so many experiences with different cultures within the Muslim community, and within the Muslim context, which was amazing because it opened my eyes to what Islam looks like in different cultures and different communities, and it's beautiful everywhere. But also that, like, our really good friend Amina, like her parents are in an interracial marriage. They got married in the 80s, and I'm forever grateful to know them, to know her parents, and especially to know her mum, because that's a big step to take as a Asian, as a Pakistani woman within our community. And for me, having her example was like, oh, I can
imagine it could be comforting.
Yeah, it was like, it gave me so much more like strength to take that step, because I was like, oh, Auntie survived it, I think I can do this. If anything, I can ask her if I have problems, you know, like how did she deal with it? Like, and having those examples is so important for like the future. I mean, we will be examples to our next generation.
Maybe be good examples.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like, I hope we can be good examples and good reflections of our deen, and not so much of our cultural and racial biases.
And, you know, just taking on what you've said, like being good examples, and what I want to ask next is, you know, Islam puts a lot of emphasis on having good character and following Rasulullah's character, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's the best person, and he's the best role model and the best teacher for us to have. And I actually went to your wedding, and for the viewers who are watching, I always say that they had one of the beautiful weddings I've ever been to. But what was most beautiful about it was when it came to Tayyibah's father, he did a speech, and the first thing he said was, I want to thank Leon's mother, so Tayyibah's mother-in-law, for bringing up such a good man. I don't know how she did it, but he is a person with a great character, and he's such a lovely person. And that made me cry instantly, because not only did your father recognize that his son-in-law is a great character, like, you know, he's a great person, he's a great man, he's a great husband, but he recognized that, you know, he was brought up by this amazing woman, and to acknowledge her, to thank her. And I thought that was such a beautiful way of, you know, bringing into, you know, talking about marriages is actually good character. And for you, how important is it to observe someone's character other than their race? I mean, we have some people who may be quite cautious when it comes to race, but, you know, now's the opportunity to kind of like emphasize good character. What would you say?
I think at the end of the day, when you're together or when you're interacting with family members, we don't look at race. We look at how that person behaved. Were they friendly? Were they nice? Were they kind? Did they go out of their way to help? You know, ultimately, is those things. Like, imagine when you have guests come over. What is the number one thing your parents tell you to do? Come greet the guests, serve them. You know, like service in our religion is so important. How much does this person, how much in service is this person? How much within the community are they trying to help? What is their, like, those fundamentals, I think, outweigh anything else, outweigh language, outweigh culture, outweigh like race, outweigh skin color. It's literally like what the foundations of your relationship will be. But not only that, you have to remember that this person, whatever character they bring to your marriage, tomorrow they will be 50% of your children's parentage.
MashaAllah.
You know, either a father or a mother to your children. What kind of a father and mother will they be? What kind of a character and what characteristics will they have as parents? And like
kind of thinking
you've got to like really think about, because at the end of the day, when you're young, it's easy to think, oh, you know, it's just about me. It's all about me. But life moves on, and like once you're married and once the dust settles, it will just be you and your partner and your future. So
and that's really important, yeah. And you're left with whatever character they bring to the table, and like you said, and it influences the future decisions that you make when you decide to have a child. You know, how they're going to be as a parent, how your children are grow up, and this is the morals and the characteristics that they take on board. I want to ask you, you know, we're nearing the end of our session. Is what advice would you give to those who are struggling to share their interracial relationship with their family? You know, they have a relationship, but they're worried about sharing it to their parents, to their siblings. You know, what advice do you give? What tips will you share?
I think outside of the context of you having a person that you want to tell your parents about, first open the conversation. First take them on that journey you've been on. Expose them, if you can, to different cultures and different people. In my own experience, I always brought home my friends from university, and they would be like from different parts of the world. I brought home people, I brought home Singaporeans, I brought home Africans, I'd bring home Chinese people. Like literally everyone and anyone had been to my house, you know. So those conversations naturally had the opportunity to happen. So there was like a time where one of my friends from Singapore came over, and my mum was like, you know what I really liked about her is that she likes to chat, but she chats about things and not people.
Oh, it's amazing. That's a great characteristic to have, actually.
Exactly, right? Like you're not backbiting, you're not gossiping, you're talking, but your talk is informative. It's not, you know, slandering someone, for example. But that is like, for me, like that's the takeaway my mum had from that interaction. And that helped inform her that, oh, you know, other cultures, maybe they do some other things better than us. You know, maybe they are able to teach their children something we have not been able to teach ours. So having like those conversations outside the context of this is a person I've got and this is who I want to be with, have those open dialogues, and also try to facilitate as many open cultural interactions as you can, because we forget that we, growing up as younger people, have had the opportunity to mix with cultures through school, through university, through work, and our parents haven't always had those opportunities.
Exactly,
they haven't been able to step out of their comfort zone or their communities, you know. So I think like a part of it is our responsibility to open their eyes, but the other part, I guess, is like, I guess for parents is to take a minute, you know, slow down and have a real think about what your child is saying, and critically think what it is you want ultimately for your child. And for most parents, that is, I just want my child to be happy. But they need to be able to come to that conclusion where they can be like, yeah, actually, I just want my child to be happy. I want my child to be looked after, to be taken care of, to be safe. You know?
And what advice would you give to those parents who are struggling to accept interracial marriages, who are struggling to kind of wrap their minds around the concept of, bringing in someone who's very different from their culture and their upbringing?
Yeah, I think for like a lot of the times, I think parents have fears, and I talk about those fears. If you have a fear for your child and you have a fear for their future, talk to them, not in a judgy, angry way, but have a good conversation. It's easier that way, like to just sit down and be like, I know you're thinking about this, but this is what I'm scared about. This is the fear I have for your future, And like for me, that was a big thing as well. Like at one point when I first introduced my husband to my parents and I said, this is, someone I'd like to marry, my dad's questions weren't based around, oh no, like you can't, how dare you, how could you bring this person? It was more like, this is a big step for you. It's a different culture. He's a different race. His culture and his people face racism that you do not face. You've never faced. His people have been through things that you have not been through. You will never go through. Are you going to be okay with that? Are you going to be okay in coping with that? And also, like they highlighted, because for them, it was like, this is marriage, it's for life. So if you're okay with it, we're okay with it. If you're strong enough to deal with this, that's fine. What we don't want is for you to go into this not having thought about it. We didn't highlight it to you, and now 2-3 years down the line, you're like, this is too much for me, I'm not strong enough, and you leave. Like they were like, categorically, they were just like, that's not okay for us. We as parents, we need to make sure that we have informed you to the best of our ability and advised you to the best of our ability so that you can make the most well-informed decision for yourself. So for my dad, his number one question was, you might face racism, your children might face racism. They'll be identified as being Black before they're identified as being Pakistani. Are you going to be okay? Will you be able to cope? And once they had assurance from me that I was okay with this, that I had thought about this, that yes, this is a valid concern that they've got, and I gave them space to not only air their concerns to me, but I had taken time to consider it properly. They were okay with that.
MashaAllah. And I find that such, there's so much wisdom in that, we think about the present, but our parents, when it comes to this type of situation, isn't the fact that they're against someone's race or the color of their skin, but actually they have fear about the unknown and about how you've been raised and how it can affect you in the future. And I think that's really, so much love in there. I can tell that, your parents really cherish you, and the fact that they're trying to highlight possibilities that can come true, like, and possibly that you haven't thought about, like, have you thought of this scenario, and are you okay with it? How will you react to it? And once they've had the reassurance, like, actually, she's going to be okay, I think they're going to do fine. And alhamdulillah, they were very welcoming, and I know that they're very loving towards your husband, alhamdulillah.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. I think a lot of it is like you said, it's rooted in fear, but also parents just want the best for their children ultimately.
Exactly.
And which is why they're like, you know what, marry within the culture, because we know the culture, not because the culture is like something they think is almighty, but because they think actually this is something we know we can control as part of it. We know the people. We can find out about your potential spouse from other people. Like that was another concern my parents had, was like, okay, now how do we find out about Leon and if he's a good person or not? Because you've told us this, but we now as parents have to verify this for ourselves. Who can we talk to? He's not from our community. We have no contacts. And it was like that extra step, that extra little bit of hard work the parents had to do, to like, they had to come down to London, they had to talk to people around Leon's community to find out what he's like and stuff, which is obviously something you do even if it was a Pakistani person I was marrying, they would do. It would just be a little bit easier for them, you know, to do it if it was a Pakistani person. It was just a little bit difficult because he wasn't Pakistani. But
And I think that's a deterrent, isn't it? An extra bit of work. It's
exactly. So I think that's like one thing for parents is like, don't be deterred by this extra bit of work. Just do it. For the ultimate, do it. Take
there you go. That's a great advice. Like at the end, like, you know what, it's a bit of extra work, but it'll be worth it. You'll do it, you know, if you can do it for someone who's in the same culture, do the extra bit of work just to verify that the person that your child wants to marry is a good person. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for those reminders. And the one thing that I will take away from this entire episode is the importance of having open dialogue with your parents, like having those honest conversations, because they grew up differently. They grew up in a different scenario. So to understand them and to understand their fears and to understand that they're legitimate, that they're there, and that you need to talk about it. But also, is what I take away from you, Tayyibah, is the importance of having good character and showing good character. In all those different scenarios that you're in, and because that can open people's eyes to the beauty of other cultures and other races. So thank you for those beautiful reminders, and I just want to take this time to just thank you for so much for coming onto Sisters Hour and to share your experience. And I know at the beginning you said that actually this is my own personal experience, and other interracial couples will face different challenges and different obstacles, and I just thank you for highlighting that it's not the same. Every marriage is different, and every interracial marriage faces a different challenge. So thank you so much for those reminders and for coming on and for sharing a personal part of you. Any last words from you? Sorry.
No, just I think be open.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much. For those viewers who are watching us, I just want to thank you for taking the time to watch this amazing episode. I hope you've learned something from it, and maybe you take on board what Tayyibah has said, and I hope that she, her gems of advice has influenced you and has benefited you. But for now, I just want to again thank you, Tayyibah, for coming on. Next week we will be having another episode of Sisters Hour at the same time at the same place, so do tune in. But for now, thank you very much. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope everybody has a great day. Have a great weekend. Assalamu'alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alaikum salam.